Today I'm comparing the most popular cambered multi-grip bars out there, and I'm not holding anything back as we put these 6 bars up against each other to find out which one is the right one for your home gym. From the least expensive, the Bells of Steel Arch Nemesis, up to that which it most closely resembles, the Kabuki Cadillac bar. The one who's inspired a lot of others, the EliteFTS American Cambered Bar, and of course its closest relative, the Titan Multi-Grip Cambered Bar. And the new kids on the block, Reps Cambered Swiss Bar, and the most expensive of them all, Rogue's MG4C. But before we get too far into this, here's my disclaimer. I apologize if I'm too hard on these bars. I understand these multi-million-dollar companies have feelings too, and it may be your place to defend them, but as a reviewer, I don't get to be biased. I get to be bullied online. So let's be honest, we're all built differently and have distinct wants and needs with our equipment. So all of these bars are gonna work and feel a little differently to everyone. And if some moron online says something you don't like, just remember, he's an influencer. What a fucking joke. Listen, I wrote this really clever, super funny thing on why you'd want a multi-grip cambered bar, but then realized I'm not really attractive or interesting enough for people to watch me talk for 30 minutes, so I cut all that out. But if it's something you're interested in hearing more on, you can find my explanations in each of our reviews of these bars. I've also tried to speed things up by creating a super cool, exciting spreadsheet that you'll all enjoy. At least I hope you do, because I spent hours trying to answer your questions from Instagram, measuring each bar, writing their specs up, and making it. So at least lie to me if you don't. And if you want to see our spreadsheet or our other reviews on any of these bars, I've linked them all in the description right next to the affiliate links, which I've shamelessly put in there because this video cost me over $2,000 to make, as these bars weren't free. So, you know, help me feed my addiction, and hopefully I help you save some money, or you can at least live vicariously through me. Let's start off with my least favorite of the bars, which is this version of Titan's multi-grip cambered bar. Titan, or Titan, as I'm told, there's 2 T's in the word by people in the comments, but my Connecticut accent and brain won't accept that, so good luck not hearing me say it wrong every time I do. Now, this is apparently the old version because Titan has quietly updated their design recently without giving us that coveted V2 that indicates we were nice enough to pay to test their product for them, and they've ironed out all the issues. That being said, props to Titan for listening to feedback and tweaking the design, even if it did make it a little bit more like the bar it was copying in the first place. So let's talk about what's been changed and how much those tweaks alter my opinion on this bar. They've essentially modified 3 things with this, with the biggest change being they shrunk the cambered section of the frame from 41 inches down to 39.25, which makes it much easier to rack, because right now this version in both 47 and 49 inch racks, it's really tight. With that change, they've also angled in the edges of the frame, which also helps with racking a little more, but this is where you'll see even stronger similarities between it and the EliteFTS bar it's essentially copying. They've added knurling marks to the center of the handles to help with your hand alignment, which is a nice addition, especially since this is a very deep bar, which is probably my biggest complaint about it. That extra frame depth and size in general can make it a little harder to balance, and it's actually the widest of all of these bars at over 10 inches. And I'm gonna argue this isn't the time you'd wish you had another inch. The tweaks to the frame do bring the weight down from 47 pounds to 39, which can make plate math a little more difficult, but it's really not a huge deal. And like most Titan products, it's close enough. The knurling is still okay at best, which is typical of a powder-coated knurl, and the sleeves are also powder-coated, which means you'll rub it off real fast, the finish. And the sleeves have a slightly undersized diameter at 48 millimeters, which means your Olympic collars might not be that tight on them. I'm sure I could nitpick more, but I feel like I'm maybe being a little harsh on this bar because generally it's decent and a lot of people do like it. The build quality overall, now Titan can be inconsistent, it's actually pretty decent for this price, and the spacing of the handles works well for me, though the outside handles are neutral and I'd prefer angled so they follow the orientation of my arms as my grip widens, but that's a personal preference. So while they've updated and improved it some, I just don't really see it competing well against the others because of the issues I've mentioned and the fact that it's a copycat design. Which isn't to say a lot of these bars aren't drawing inspiration from each other, but it's no longer the cheapest option and there's a lot of options now, so it's not a bar I typically recommend unless it's on sale. It makes sense to talk about Elite's bar next, since not only is it a big reason we've gotten to this point, but it's the most direct comparison to Titan's bar. Now this is where I'm gonna make some enemies. As I say, this bar is a little overrated, and I say that with the utmost respect for EliteFTS and Dave Tate. I have loved what they've done for the community and to get us to this point, but this type of bar has evolved a lot lately and this just really hasn't kept up. Now I judge these bars based on their base price, not their sale price. So if I sound overly critical, that's me judging the American Cambered Grip Bar at $315. When it's on sale though, it's a whole different story, as this is a much better bar than Titan's for almost the same price. And I'd happily buy it, never look back, and forgive a lot of its shortcomings. But I paid full price, which is probably why I'm so bitter. This is a tough one for me because the angles on the handles, the handle spacing, except maybe the center one, which we'll get to in a minute, and the camber depth are all really well done, which means overall it functions well, and isn't that the most important thing? It works well for rows, you can flip it and do board presses with it since the two outside sets of handles are in line with the weight, and it's rackable in both 47 and 49 inch racks. And it's a bar I want to love because I can't overemphasize the importance of American ingenuity and manufacturing. So what are my issues? Just like with the others that have powder coated sleeves, you're gonna murder this finish in no time. And these sleeves are made out of steel pipe, which means you'll need axle collars for them, which is an additional cost if you don't already have some. I'd be fine with a lack of knurling on these beefy handles if there was at least some texture to the coating, but this powder coating is pretty smooth and they can get a little slick. Sure, you could add tape, but suggesting mods kind of feels like making excuses. The overall build quality is lacking, with welds that are solid but kind of look like my high school students made them, and there is a good amount of weld splatter. Add in the plastic end caps on the sleeves and the worst packaging of all of these, which is honestly impressive since the arch Nemesis bars is minimal at best, and you can see why you may not have the best impression out of the box, as it may take a beating before you ever get your hands on it. All right, let's say you're not some whiny reviewer trying to look tough online so his family finally accepts him, and you don't care about any of that. In my opinion, the frame is still a little bit deep at 9 inches, which makes it a little less stable than some of these others. And if we criticize the MG4 heavily for its frame depth, it makes sense here as well. Now this isn't an issue, more of a note, but just like with other flat cambered bars, this wouldn't happen with a rounded camber or a tapered camber, but the outside grips, while retaining the extra range of motion the camber provides, they lose the balance a camber adds because these grips are on the same plane as the weight, making it act like a flat multi-grip bar in those positions. And while I like the thought of 4 sets of grips, to me, the closest grip is too narrow because it puts pressure on my wrists, which is what I'm trying to alleviate with a multi-grip bar, adding stress to my joints. That grip also makes, as my grandma used to say, things a little tippy-canoe. Listen, it's a good bar, but if they can run sales pretty regularly that take $80 off the price, then why can't we make a few changes to update it? Because let's be honest, these companies aren't selling things at a loss. And whereas the American Cambered Bar was a knock out of the park when there were less options, I just feel like it's starting to show its age. Next, let's talk about Reps Cambered Swiss Bar, which is kind of our in-between at $290 shipped before we get to the cheapest option, the Bells of Steel Arch Nemesis bar, and then the two most expensive ones, which are both made by Rogue Fitness. And if you don't want to drop a car payment on a barbell, this might be a good option for you. The welds and knurling aren't anything to get excited about, but it features a better build quality than the others we've already talked about, and with touches like Olympic-sized sleeves, the fact it actually weighs 45 pounds, which is oddly rare, and the ability to attach cables to it with its removable eye hook, it's a solid bar, even if like all these other bars, it's a bit large to actually move around to do so. Actually, after using Reps Open Trap Bar, it made me wish these sleeves had a similar mounting system so you could pull them on and off easily, which would make it a little more practical to use on your trainer. They've opted for the handles to become more neutral the further you go versus something like the Kabuki Cadillac bar where it's the opposite. But everyone's going to have different preferences on how they want their hands when they're pushing from below. But I think we can all agree it's more enjoyable when you've got two thick handles like these at 35 millimeters in diameter. The other nice thing about this bar versus basically all the others is that it was designed to fit in both 47-inch wide and 49-inch wide racks, making this the king of clearance when racking and unracking. The trade-off there is with the 3 sets of handles, only the outside set is giving you a greater range of motion with the camber. And in general, they're all a little narrower in their spacing versus a lot of these other bars. But with a camber depth of 2 inches and being overall well done and pretty well balanced, it tends to get the job done, and it is a bar I enjoy using. Next, let's check out our least expensive option, the Bells of Steel Arch Nemesis bar. Now, let's tell it like it is. This is essentially a budget Cadillac bar. If we're gonna be hard on Titan for copying Elite, we have to admit that Bells has basically done the same thing here. But I think they're far enough apart that they should be judged separately, as this is by far the smallest and lightest option at 24 pounds. Now, that size does make it easier to move around, which is nice because it's the only other bar besides Reps that can attach to your cables, but even small things can be difficult to cram into tight spaces. And just like Reps, it might not actually be practical to use on your trainer depending on your setup. The other issue with its weight that you might want to be aware of if you're like me and constantly loading up an insane amount of weights on the bar so you can lie to people online while you pretend you're strong is it can get a little tippy if you load up one side with 2 plates at a time. If you take a look at this bar and Kabuki's, you'll notice a lot of similarities. The handle spacing, camber, and frame width are all very similar, which means functionally they're really not that far off, though neither are going to be easy to rack in a 47-inch wide rack like this. Now, Kabuki's bar is easily the better bar, but it should be at over $500 shipped versus this at $200. And with such a huge price gap, it's easy to be more forgiving with the quality of Bell's bar. So what are the differences between the two? Before we get too far, I should clarify we're comparing the newest version of the Caddy here, which is made in the US by Rogue Fitness and shipped out by them as well. The Caddy in general, especially with Rogue manufacturing it, is going to have a better build quality. With the welds, for example, or even the knurling, though still a powder-coated knurl, is probably second to only the MG4C, which Rogue also makes. And though the Arch Nemesis does have knurling, which I prefer versus not having any at all, it's a pretty passive knurl at best. The Caddy also weighs 45 pounds, which makes plate math easier, and I prefer the 34 millimeter diameter handles to the 20 millimeter diameter handles of the Arch Nemesis for pressing movements. Not that I have a strong preference either way. The Arch Nemesis also has powder-coated sleeves, so they're gonna get worn down easily, and since they are steel pipe sleeves like Elite's bar, you'll need axle collars for them. There are other differences between them, which we'll hit on as we talk more about the Caddy in a second, But overall, if you're like me, okay, bad example. If you're nothing like me and you can admit to yourself you'll probably only use this bar a few times a month at best to work in a few variations, or if you just want to try out a cambered bar before you swap it out for a much more expensive one when your wife isn't looking, I think the Arch Nemesis is a good choice as they really don't perform that differently. Which brings us to the final two. And if none of the others have caught your eye so far, this is where things might get interesting if you can stomach the prices. Because they're so expensive, our expectations are logically much higher, but I still think both of these bars perform very well in that they are the best of the bunch, as they should be at these prices. The Rogue Kabuki collaboration on the Kadillac bar, which I feel like it really needs like a cute nickname, Rogaki. Wait, no, maybe this is getting a little too close to something that'll cancel my channel, so let's move on. Anyway, this is the best version of this bar, though I wouldn't go trading in an older version of the Caddy just to get it. The added knurling is an upgrade since the old version had a textured powder coat instead, and the upgraded build quality with Rogue making it only improved what was already a great bar. The issue? It's just too expensive, and to me it doesn't feel like a bar that costs over $500 shipped. Now it is a very well balanced bar, and I wouldn't blame you for wanting it as it performs very well. And along with my MG4CN, it's probably my most used cambered bar, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. The widest grip is maybe a little bit too wide for some, especially at that full range of motion, because remember, the entire point of these bars is to relieve stress, not add to it. And the ringing of those hollow rib sleeves may grind at your soul a little bit like nails on a chalkboard when loading plates. And let's not forget, it's also probably the king of decapitation. But all cambered bars are gonna try to flip because their center of gravity sits higher because of this camber. The finish is well done on this thing, and it's gonna hold up well over time, even on these Olympic-sized sleeves, though only Rogue could figure out a way to make this bar even more expensive because you can upgrade to their proprietary matte back finish on the sleeves and hardware for another $50. Overall though, if you've got the money and can justify the purchase, this is a very good bar with possibly the best feel when actually using it, which is why it gets put into the rotation more than most of these other bars. Which leaves us with our final contender, the Rogue MG4CN, with that N standing for narrow. If you take a look at all of these bars, you'll notice they're all a little different, just like us. So while I may love the Caddy but dislike the outside grip, others might think differently. And that's where this series of bars comes in. With the ability to choose the angle of your handles and the placement of them, it can be built to fit you, and that's the appeal here. And with Rogue listening to what I said in my review and agreeing to every change I demanded, this is a better bar than the original MG4C, but it still has some of the same flaws. The biggest issue with the original was that it had a frame that was much too deep, which affected its stability. So they shrunk the frame in, which has made the bar much more stable. They also added the option for 32mm handles on the MG4C and made them standard on this version. The actual process of moving the handles is still tedious, so just realize once you've dialed them into where you want them, you're probably never going to move them. And even if you did, it would leave markings on your very expensive bar because they didn't add washers like the ones I've added. This bar can get very big and bulky as each set of handles adds a few more pounds to its weight, which makes plate math a little harder as this one weighs in at 63 pounds or so. So I just get the short sleeve version as I've got the long sleeves here and it's awkward to move around. I also think they should have added one more set of holes for handles here because they've pretty much got the space, and at 26 inches, it essentially ties reps for the widest narrow grip these bars offer. The build quality is better than the others, whether you choose stainless steel or proprietary black finish, but calling it pricey is an understatement, as this one cost me just under $700 shipped, though with the short sleeves, you'd save $70. So is this the best bar? That's hard to say because I have no idea how these will fit you. But I do think the fact that you can adjust the handle positions and angles will appeal to many people that don't conform to what these bars are offering. And if I was forced to keep only one, this would probably be the one I choose. So there you have it, 20 minutes later and I've talked you out of every bar. Listen, these are all good options, but when you're spending money, you want to know the ins and outs of everything, though I'm sure I've missed a lot, so let me know in the comments. But you should also definitely watch every single cambered bar review we've made first. Not because I need the 2 cents of advertising money, but there's a lot more details in each of those than I could provide here. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.